Hi, this is Chloe from Inner Whispers, and today I'll be looking at the cards on the Learn Lenormand course, cards from the rider to the clouds. So a quick reminder, do try and keep in mind that 18th century mindset. How would the people of that time have seen these images? What would they have thought of the different animals and objects and people in them? Also consider the different levels of interpretation, from the more purely symbolic to the more literal, and also through the cartomantic. And what kind of a person would this have been? What kind of timing might it offer us? So please do feel free to pause the video and think about the questions asked. And these should also be available for you as a PDF of the slides so that you can work through them ahead of watching this if that's what you would prefer to do. In any case, it really is beneficial to make notes and journal so that you trigger your own thinking process in this. So let's take a look at some of the cards. I'll be illustrating these cards throughout with three different versions. On the left we have the Wings of Change Lenormand, which is a fairy-based deck. On the right we have the Kindergarten Lenormand, which is a much simpler deck, but it does have playing card inserts for the cartomantic side to be a little bit clearer. And finally, of course, there is also the Celtic Lenormand. So the questions for the rider are: why is the rider on his horse? What kind of person takes on this role? What physical effects are there from riding every day? And how fast does a rider travel? If you think about why the rider is on his horse, the Celtic Lenormand image, for example, shows us a bard, and he's travelling fast. Bards used to go from village to village, and one thing they would do would be pass on messages from the other villages. So if Aunt Bessie is across the stream, then you'd hear about her news through the bard. But he would also carry tales of the sort of bigger leaders and epic tales, epic poems of the bigger things going on in the wider world. So he represents messages of all kinds, from the very personal to much more news of the world type thing. What kind of person would take on this role? Well, travelling and giving messages, you'd need to be quite sociable, quite outgoing, quite happy talking with a variety of different people, so quite confident, and also quite talkative. So there's all those aspects to this card if it's describing a person. In terms of the physical effects from riding every day, these are really two different things. On the one hand, we have that riding a horse is a physical activity, so it would keep you quite fit, and this card, for some people at least, is about sport or athleticism. It is also, if you think about it, riding on a horse could be quite jarring for your joints, and it's especially hard work for the legs that have to hold on. So in terms of health, this is associated with the lower legs and particularly the knee and ankle joints. And in terms of how fast the rider travels, well, by modern standards, of course, we might consider him quite slow, but if you compare him to what else would have been available at the time, he'd be much faster than going on foot, faster still than going in a carriage where the horse has to draw all that extra weight, and definitely faster than going by ship. So the rider is considered quite fast. He also represents movement, and the traditional timing for the rider is up to about 3 days. So the key words that we have for the rider include all of these things: news and messages, information, movement, a declaration or announcement. And as a person, he represents a young or youthful man, a lover perhaps, or a visitor, someone who's just passing through. At a more spiritual level, we might see this in terms of prayer or messages from spirit. And as I say, in health, he's foot and knee joints, legs, and messages about your health. Moving on to the Clover. The questions we have are: how easy is it to spot a clover leaf as you're walking around? What words describe the clover physically? How valuable is the clover in itself? And how long does clover bloom for? So if you think about sort of walking around, unless you keep your eyes open, you're not going to spot a clover. If we talk about it physically, it is something that's quite small, and so you could easily walk past it, and if you're not looking, if you're not keeping your eyes open for that opportunity, you won't see it. In terms of how valuable the clover is in and of itself, the answer is not at all. However, it is associated with good luck, and that's where the fortune element comes into it. As for how long the clover blooms for, once again, it's not very long. So when we look at the key words, we'll find things like opportunity. You have to keep your eyes open for it. It's good luck, but small good luck. This is more your scratch card win than your big lottery win, for example. And it can represent money, but it isn't normally a huge amount. In terms of other things, it's a short time frame. So if we think about health, for instance, it might be a 24-hour bug. In terms of the spiritual side of things, it could represent omens or blessings, things that you have to keep your eyes open to see, and they are good fortune, but not necessarily a big thing. Moving on to the ship. The questions that we have are: what journeys do ships make, and for what reasons? How safe is crossing an ocean? And how might you feel leaving your family and friends? In terms of the journeys that ships make, or made particularly in the 18th century, they would often be used for transporting goods, for commerce, and so this card is often associated with trade and commerce. They are normally longer journeys, it's across the ocean, so this also has connotations of something that is foreign. And other reasons that you might take a ship, it was also used for emigration and also for travel in the same way as it is now. So it could represent tourism. So this card does also represent holidays and travel in that regard. Thinking about how safe is crossing an ocean, well, it's not entirely safe, and holidays likewise can be a bit of an adventure. The same is true with commerce. It's not something that is safe or secure, but sometimes it's good to take those kinds of risks. And how you might feel leaving your home, family and friends, well, there is an element of nostalgia to this card, especially if we think of emigration. That was often for good, so you would never see people again, and so it can represent that slight sadness of looking back towards the past. The card is also used these days for any kind of motorised vehicle, for long distance travel, so things like aeroplanes and trains would also be included in it, and for this idea of transition. As I say, in terms of descriptors, it would be foreign or international, moving, exploratory, free and adventurous. As a person, a foreigner or a business person, or even a free spirit. And at a more spiritual level, we have crossing over, but also the soul's journey within this lifetime, as well as within others. In terms of health, it's associated with the watery organs and water balance in general, as well as possible psychosomatic causes for illness, with the nostalgia link. Moving on to look at various images of the house and what we can glean from those. The questions that come up are: which is the first house you lived in? Who else lived there? What makes a house a home? And is a house a small investment? At a cartomantic level, you may note that this is the King of Hearts, and so in terms of a person, this card is sometimes seen as being a kindly man, normally a bit older, perhaps a patriarch, a house husband, or a father figure. And if we think about which is the first house you lived in and who else lived there, well, that would be your family home normally, and that your close family lived there. So it represents close family, not distant ancestors who wouldn't have been alive, but the people that you actually know that you lived with. And in terms of what makes a house a home, this card is also associated with things that are cosy, familiar as well as familial, and safety perhaps, though that isn't the case for everyone. The question of is a house a small investment points us to the fact that this can be used for real estate very generally and for property, but in that case it is more fixed property, the kind of thing that you might inherit, like a family home. and that this is something that is quite valuable in that sense. So we have keywords like homely, comfortable, cosy, also trustworthy perhaps. And at a spiritual level, we have a spiritual home or our spiritual family, which may be very different from our everyday family. In terms of health, it's seen as the whole body or holistic health, and it can also be about going to see a chief specialist. Moving on to the tree, we have some more images here. And the questions: how healthy is it to live somewhere without trees? What do roots symbolise? How mobile are trees? And how long do trees live? These questions lead us towards ideas about health. So trees are often considered the lungs of the planet, and if we didn't have any trees, then neither the planet nor we would be very healthy. And this card is very strongly associated with health, particularly good health. If it's poor health, then we might look at the coffin. So it's also about what roots symbolise, and that can be at a level, personal level perhaps, of ancestors, but it's also about where do you feel rooted, what's your environment, where do you feel comfortable. It could be about your actual physical location, and it is about nature, for instance. How mobile are trees? Well, not very, so there is a certain fixedness about this card, a certain rootedness. And trees live for quite a long time, so it is also associated with things that are enduring or long-lasting, which can also lead to interpretations about things being boring, though that's quite a personal way. You may or may not see it that way. So we have these keywords for it, including outdoors, patience, deep-rooted issues perhaps, being healthy and outdoorsy, or unmoving and boring. In terms of the spiritual side, it could be the body-mind-spirit connection, groundedness, or a connection to your ancestors. And in terms of health, as I say, the trees are the lungs of the planet, so it is associated with the lungs and chest, but also natural healing or possibly inherited diseases. Moving on, we come to the clouds, card 6. And in all the depictions you'll see that there is a dark and a light side to the clouds. Questions here are: how clearly can you see on a foggy day? What difference might there be between having dark clouds around you rather than light clouds? And if there are two sides to something, is it simple? With these questions, what I was trying to get at in part is the idea that on a foggy day you can't see clearly. So this is a card of confusion, uncertainty, doubt. And in terms of the difference between the dark and light side of the card and of the clouds, it's a card which is quite often seen directionally. So if the dark clouds are towards you, your significator card, or the card that you're looking at the time, then it does tend to suggest things are perhaps a little darker, more confused. There may be depression, confusion, ambiguity, uncertainty. The light side of the cards, though, is associated with these troubles passing. It may be a little bit foggy and unclear, but it's not as bad and it is getting better. And if there are two sides to something, it isn't simple. So this connects with the confusion side, but also especially with ambiguity, polarity. This card can be used for seeing two sides to things. Amongst the other keywords that we have are delay as well, things being hidden or intangible, blurred. It can, as a person, because this is the King of Clubs, be a difficult person, an older man, a troublesome ex, or an older brother, a father figure, and a grey-haired man. Spiritually, it's about spiritual uncertainty. And in terms of health, we have the brain-mind connection linking to depression, but also because the clouds are up in the air and blown around by the wind, it does also connect with lungs. Hypochondria can be here with seeing the dark side of everything, and also potentially taking a turn for the worse. So that's cards 1 through 6 in this Learn Lenormand training. Please do tune in for the next set of cards.